Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Zia, and I make videos about full-time van life. Today I'm going to be doing a Q&A. It's not a live one. Maybe I'll do that in future. It's a little too scary for me to think about now. But I asked last week if some of you would leave questions for me, and you did. So I think a few of them are going to take a while to discuss. So I'm just going to address 5 questions for today. I've got my notes. The first question is from Gloria, and she asks, will you be filming at meeting events, and will you be interviewing? Or I suppose doing van tours the way Bob Wells does. I will only film at events if people are comfortable with that. I really do hope to be doing some more interviews and van tours with people. There are a couple of full-time women right now that I'm hoping to meet up with in the next couple of months. So we'll see what happens with that. Thanks for your question, Gloria. The next question is from Bridget, and she asks, how do you find living in a van in regards to finances as a senior? And do you feel it's cheaper than living as a senior in an apartment or a rental? It is not cheaper if you are traveling. When I was on my cross-Canada road trip, I tried to budget my gas expense not to exceed what I would have been paying for my rent and utilities. And for the most part, I was able to keep within that budget until the last 10 days or so, when I was racing to get ahead of a storm that was chasing me across the Midwest, and I was having to fill up sometimes once, even twice a day, as I raced to get home and through any mountain passes. So if you're not traveling, yes, absolutely, you can save some money, especially if you live in a place like Richmond, where I live, in a suburb of Vancouver. In this area, I haven't looked recently to see what a 1-bedroom apartment would be, but I know back in 2017, I was renting a bachelor suite, and it was costing me, with the utilities, about 1,500 Canadian a month. And I'm just on a senior's pension. Now I know I'd probably be paying about $2,500 a month. I know a 2-bedroom apartment, just an older 2-bedroom apartment here, someone was asking $3,200 a month for that. Well, there's absolutely no way. Now, where I was living, I was in a basement suite, and my rent was very reasonable. And even though it was reasonable, though, I couldn't afford to do anything else other than live in my basement suite. I couldn't afford to go out for nice meals, to travel anywhere. It was even difficult to buy presents for people at Christmas or on their birthdays. I was really, really limited in what I could do. And so I found that I was sort of stuck at home doing nothing much but watching TV, which is not a life as far as I'm concerned. My name is down on a list for a subsidized seniors apartment, and it would probably cost me about what I was paying in the last rental that I was in. But the trouble with that is that it puts me back in that same place again. And that's why this year I'm trying to take control of my finances, come out of retirement, and try and earn a little more money. Luckily, YouTube is starting to monetize, and I'm making a little bit on that. At least it's covering my gas expenses right now, so that's a good thing. But it really depends. It depends on your lifestyle. But I think overall that the fastest growing population of nomads is seniors, and senior women in particular. And the reason for that is because of the very high cost of just the cost of living in general, but appropriate, affordable housing. And senior women are often, if you're living only on a pension, are in one of the lowest income groups. So for me, living in the van is financially beneficial because I have more of a life. I can do more and have a little more freedom to live the way that I want to live. So thank you, Bridget, for your question. Soaring Higher asked me, I love that name, by the way, Soaring Higher. That could be a good workshop. She asks, or he, I'm not sure, I would love to hear about what your life was like before you became a full-time van lifer and what led you to this way of life. Well, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but kind of in a nutshell, I guess you could say that I was typical of my generation. I married my high school sweetheart, and by my mid-20s I had my 2 children. I worked full-time. I have owned apartments and homes. I've had 2 family businesses, one with my second husband, and one with a friend of mine. We had a home decor and gift store. And so I went back to college twice. I studied herbal medicine for a while. I took training to become an aerobics instructor. And I finally took a sabbatical from the family business and went back to college to get my counseling certification. And then I also became a certified sacred gifts guide. I've always had a bit of wanderlust and always been wanting to go on adventures, although I very rarely ever did. My mother told me that when I was only about 3 years old, I think, she got a phone call from my grandparents who lived many, many blocks from where we lived, to ask her where I was. And she said, oh, she's out in the yard playing. And they said, no, she's at our house. And I had gone from the 27th Street all the way down to 19th Street, down the main road in our city, in our town, and 4 blocks off the main road. So I'd gone an awful long way. I think nowadays if anyone saw a toddler walking all alone down the sidewalk, they'd probably stop and try and find out where that toddler came from. But back then, nobody stopped me. I just kept going, and I don't know how I knew how to find my way there, but I did. Then the day that I got my driver's license, I got into the car for the first time by myself, locked the door, cranked up the music, and felt so safe. My earlier years, my childhood and my teens, there was an awful lot of trauma in it. Not trauma at home, but trauma. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control. I felt I was safe. I felt I could go anywhere I wanted to go. And I dreamed my whole life of one day just throwing some jeans and t-shirts in a duffel bag or a backpack and heading out to destinations unknown. It was probably in around 2014 maybe that I started seeing videos about van life. I saw Bob Wells on Cheap RV Living. I saw Carolyn's RV Life and a few others. And because I was realizing that after my second marriage ended and I ended up losing my home, I couldn't afford to fight for anything. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I ended up starting from square one with nothing. And I realized that I was going to run out of savings by subsidizing my $1,500 a month expenses in the bachelor suite I was in. So I started thinking that maybe having a Class C or a van might be a viable option for me. And I started looking into that. And then in 2018, my daughter asked me, she said, they had been given notice to vacate the house that they were renting, and if they could find a house that had space for me, a separate space for me, would I be interested in that? And I said yes. So I stopped looking at that point. And as I say, the rent was very reasonable, but I wasn't living life. I wasn't doing anything and couldn't afford to go anywhere or have any fun. And so my mom passed away in 2019. Because my mom had passed away, she had left me a bit of money. That's how I was able to buy the first little van. And at that point in time, I decided to buy myself a little Transit Connect XLT, and my son-in-law built it out for me. I helped to insulate. I painted the inside. I decorated. It was cute as a button. I just loved it. It was very Scandi design. And went out on a couple of little camping trips and adventures, but realized because I was developing some arthritis at that time that it was just too small for me. I couldn't access things easily. So I decided that I was going to have to sell that van, and I was really sad, disheartened, and I thought I was going to have to give up on my dream. And then I thought to myself, no, don't give up on it. Just get a bigger van if you can. So I knew it would have to be an older vehicle if I wanted something bigger. I couldn't afford a big new van, or I couldn't afford to build out something big and new. I knew I needed an older camper van. And that's when I found Luna. And so I bought her, and by this time I was about to turn 70. And I thought to myself, if I don't do that Trans-Canada trip now, I'm never going to do it. And I also thought it would be an amazing way to mark my 70th birthday. And so I did that in 2022. I went on a 4.5-month road trip all the way from BC to Newfoundland, down into the New England states, and then back across the Midwest and home. I came back to my home base and was there for about, I think it was about 6 months, maybe a bit longer than that, and realized I was back in the position I'd been in before, where I couldn't afford to go anywhere or do anything, and I was just sitting at home watching TV. And I thought, I'm going to give full-time van life a chance. I wanted to give it at least a year and see how that felt. And so here I am now. It will be a year on May 1st, and today it's March now. It's early March. So come May 1st, it will be a full year for me. Even longer than that if you add in my 4.5 months on my road trip. And I love it. I love it when I'm traveling, because I think that's who I am. I'm a traveler. I love seeing new sights. I love meeting new people and having new experiences. But at the moment, it's winter up here in Canada, and my furnace isn't working at the moment, so I am staying stationary. I'm very, very fortunate that I am in, most of the time, in a friend's driveway, occasionally at a family member's house. And I've got an extension cord running into a little electric heater, and I'm staying very cozy. But it's not a lot of fun. It's not a lot of fun. I want to be on the road. I want to be out there traveling again. I think that next year I will be going back to the RTR and the WRTR, and next year I will plan on staying down south much longer than I did this year. In part I came back early because I was having the mechanical issues with Luna, but also, you know, it was the cost of travel insurance. So that's kind of my story. That's what led me to this. I've always had a bit of wanderlust. I had a cousin in England, because I was born in London in England. I have a cousin who said that I had Romany blood, so maybe I'm a natural born traveler. It's just part of my DNA. I'm sure some of you can relate to that too. So, thank you, Soaring Higher, for your question. The next question is from Jane. And she says, I wonder if you could talk about winter, a fact we Canucks have to deal with, that's for sure, especially those that are unable to travel south in search of warmer temperatures. And yes, winter. Well, I'm pretty lucky here because winter in BC on the coast, on the southwest coast of BC, is usually pretty mild. We get a lot of rain. We don't usually get a lot of snow, and we might have a couple of periods during the winter where for a few days our temperatures drop into the minus area. And because, as I just said, answering the last question, I've been able to stay in a friend's driveway or in family's driveway, I haven't had an issue with that. And I've been able to stay warm enough. But the rest of Canada and the interior and northern parts of BC get hit with really cold temperatures. It can fall into the minus 35 Celsius zone, or even colder sometimes, and lots of snow. And so that is a real issue. And of course, as I had mentioned in my interview with Bob Wells, I couldn't afford a lot of travel insurance. I'm going to look for a better deal next year. I know I paid too much, but it was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and I just went with the company I'd gone with before. But I'll look for a better deal next year when I go down south. But for many Canadian nomads, health insurance, travel health insurance, is out of the question. So how do you stay warm in Canada when you're a nomad through the winter? There are multiple ways that you can stay warm, even in minus 30, minus 40 temperatures, if you're living in a vehicle. Some of them will only be possible if you're in a decent sized vehicle. For example, the Mr. Buddy propane heaters and diesel heaters. Propane needs a lot of ventilation. Diesel needs ventilation as well. And so they're not going to work all that well if you're in a small vehicle like a car or an SUV. But there are some diesel heaters out now that are very slim, don't take up a lot of room, and Bob Wells actually does a video on one that can be used in a car if you're in a car. And the nice thing about diesel heat is that it's a dry heat. Propane is damp, and one of the things that we all want to avoid living in our vehicles is dampness, which will create mold. And, you know, in the part of BC that I live in, we get an awful lot of rain here. So I have to be really careful about the dampness in Luna. Some people install small wood stoves. Even in camper vans, I've seen them. And you can get the most adorable little mini wood stoves. I'd love to have one, actually, just for the ambiance as well. They will be a source of dry heat, but of course you would have to cut a hole in the roof of your van, and that would make it less stealthy for you. And also the little tiny wood stoves, you have to, you can't obviously put a big log of wood in there, so you're feeding them very often. They burn through the smaller pieces of wood really quickly, which means that they're probably not going to last you through the night, and so that's going to disrupt your sleep, and a good night's sleep is really important. If you have some sort of battery bank like a Jackery or a Bluetti, or if you have solar power, you could use a 12-volt electric blanket. That would be a good option for you. Regarding solar again, though, here on the West Coast, we often have very overcast days, so you might not generate enough solar power to be able to run some of your conveniences. In the prairies, they get a lot of sunshine, so you might get enough solar energy to be able to use some of your appliances and stay nice and warm. Hot water bottles are a good way to stay warm. I've had a few nights where I was at freezing temperatures and my furnace wasn't working, and I wasn't plugged in with a heater. And I have a down duvet, and it kept me warm enough through the night. And I had on, of course, layers of clothing. So I had on thermal pajamas, I had on socks. Wool socks would be the best thing. And one night it was so cold I even had to put on a wool hat to keep warm. But I stayed really nice and warm. The hard part was getting up in the morning and trying to get dressed in clothes that were icy cold. That was not fun. The only downside, down will keep you really, really warm. But when you're sleeping, your body expels moisture, even though all you're doing is sleeping. And if down gets damp and you don't have any way of drying it out, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to have the opposite effect for you. Your best bet is to get a wool blanket, 100% wool. Merino wool would be the best, but I believe you can order wool blankets on Amazon that are only around, I think around $50 US, and you know, several wool blankets. That's how they used to keep warm, right? They used wool clothing, wool blankets. The old ways really do work, and so wool is a really good idea. Because even if wool gets damp, it will still keep you warm. Minus 20 sleeping bags, that's another option. Going back to duvets for a minute, rather than having a natural feather duvet, the really good quality synthetic duvets are a really good option. They will keep you warm too, keep you dry and keep you warm. Something that does work, and this would be for people who are really, probably people that are living in very small vehicles like cars or small SUVs, small minivans that don't have any kind of heat source and are on very, very limited funds. You can actually use a 3-pound container of shortening, vegetable shortening. You buy taper candles, cut them down so that they fit just above the top level of the shortening, and trim the wick a little bit. Push 3 candles down into the center of the shortening container and light that, and it will not only give you a source of really good heat, which even though there may be a small odor to it, it's very, apparently, I haven't tried this, it will raise the temperature in your vehicle as much as 20 degrees, which would make a really big difference. This isn't about maybe heating your vehicle to keep you really, really warm, but to get you to a place where you're comfortable. You can always put on a sweater or wrap a wool blanket around you if you need some extra warmth. But apparently these tins of shortening really do work. If you're using it mainly, you're using one of these shortening candles mainly for heating and not needing it for a light source, you can buy large clay pots and get some pieces of brick to place next to the shortening can. Put the clay pot upside down over it so that there's some space in there and air can get in, and it will radiate heat for you. Now, of course, this is open flame, so you have to be really, really careful with that, and also it's going to get very, very hot. And so you've got to make sure you've got it set up somewhere where you're not going to kick it over, you're not going to accidentally touch it or lean against it. But it's a very inexpensive way, probably cost you under $10 to keep your vehicle really, really warm. Because the containers that the shortening comes in, they're plastic, you've got to make sure your candles are placed very carefully away from the edges of the container. And you have to keep, as the shortening burns down, you have to keep cutting away the container, lowering it as the shortening lowers in the container. If you're worried about that, about the plastic melting or something like that, some people melt the shortening and then pour it into either a glass container or a tin container, something that they're not worried about. So that is a really inexpensive way to keep yourself warm during the coldest nights. And as I said, it can also be a source of light. That's the thing, during the winter, the depth of winter, it's getting dark around 4 o'clock. And you're probably not going to want to go to bed and get in your sleeping bag or whatever at that time of the day. You still want to be doing things within your vehicle. And so it is a really good option. I'll have to give that a try sometime. Because then, even though my furnace isn't working right now, yeah, maybe I'll do that and I'll let you know how that works out. I'll give it a try, see what it smells like, and I'll let you know. I'll get back to you on it. So those are some of the options for keeping warm. And most of those ideas, or actually pretty much all of them, I learned from watching Bob Wells on Cheap RV Living. He has quite a few different videos about different ways to stay warm. And he's a wealth of information and experience with that because he grew up in Alaska. He lived in Alaska for many years and has slept through many, many very cold nights at minus 35, minus 40. So go to Cheap RV Living and check through his videos, and if some of those ideas appeal to you, you will find full-length videos on those topics. So thank you so much, Jane, for your question. I certainly hope that helps some of the Canadians who are stuck up here for the winter, and some of the American nomads who may be in colder parts of the United States as well. The final question I'm going to answer today was sent to me by Adelina of My Big Tiny House Life. I know an awful lot of my subscribers, my viewers, came to my channel from Adelina's. If you haven't heard of her channel before, please go and check it out. I'll put it up here. My big tiny house life. Adelina lives on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. She has an amazing tiny house, and she also has a no-build van built that has some of the best ideas I've ever seen. She's a lovely, lovely lady. She has a wealth of information on different topics. Whatever video she puts out is so well researched, and she covers it fully, whatever her topic is. And she's just a lovely lady with a lovely cat named Sophie. I really recommend that you go and check out her channel. Hi, Adelina. Thank you for your question. So Adelina's asking me, do you ever wish you had a home base to come back to? And it's a really interesting question. And one of the things that I have found about living full-time and or having traveled the 4.5 months that I did is that it really helps you define exactly what it is you want in life, how you want to live your life. Oh, Charlie's slipping around on my lap. Hang on a minute. You want to get up? Oh, what's the matter? You're growling at me. Oh, what? He's grumpy today. Okay, all right. All right, there you go. It really helps you define how it is you want to live your life. I love traveling. I hope that I'm able to travel for many, many more years. But I am 72 now, and I do need to think about what may be in store for me in the next few years. What if I can't travel anymore? What am I going to do? As far as wishing I had a home base now, it's funny, you know, I always used to say I wish that I could afford to have a cottage on a lake. Well, I can't afford that, but now I have a cottage that I can take to the lake, and it doesn't always have to be the same lake. So I feel pretty blessed with that. There are times, especially when it's a gray, rainy day like today, and I have been stationary for many, many weeks now, that I kind of miss some of the conveniences of having a home base. And also, you know, it's like wherever I go, I take my home with me. But also, where I go is never my home. I don't own the places where I stay. And so I have to keep moving on. And sometimes you don't want to keep moving on. So these are things that, you know, as I say, I haven't even been a full year yet in the van. And so I'm still reconciling all of that in my mind. But here's the latest thing that's come up for me about home bases. When I was in Arizona recently, I went to Schoolypalooza. There were a lot of school buses and shuttle buses there. And I thought that would be an amazing tiny house. I don't have the resources at this point in time to build a tiny house, but shuttle buses are quite inexpensive. They're wider than your typical vans like Luna, and usually a little bit longer. They have straighter walls, and so they're easier to build out. And I realized that I could live very comfortably in a shuttle bus. And what I'm hoping, and actually to be very honest with you, I have looked at a few recently. And I had one amazing one scooped from me, and I might do a little video on some of them in the future. I'm starting to think that I do need to plan for the future, and also because, as I've mentioned in previous videos, it is getting harder to be a full-time nomad, and there are more restrictions in cities on where you can park, whether you can park overnight. As van life is becoming more mainstream, more people are learning about it, more municipalities, cities, towns, states, provinces are putting laws into place where they don't seem to want to have that. So I'm thinking that if in the future, in the next maybe year, I can get myself into a shuttle bus, still travel in it, but maybe find somewhere where a piece of property where I can have that bus. And at some point in time when I can't travel anymore, where I could park it permanently and then maybe get myself a small little car that I could drive around in, but live in my tiny house shuttle bus. That's what I'd really like to do. I know all of my family and friends are really hoping I get into one of these seniors apartments. And if one comes up, I will probably take it for the time being. But it's not what I want. It's not how I want to live. I've always been drawn to quirky little spaces. A few years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I nearly bought a floating home, a cute little one-bedroom cottage floating on the river out near Fort Langley in BC. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. And I love Luna. I love little spaces. And so for me, the perfect option would be a converted shuttle bus that I could park somewhere permanently and be able to have a few plants growing outside, maybe a few vegetables, somewhere out in the country. That's what I would like to see in the future. So I don't need a home base right now. Sometimes I miss it. I definitely don't miss it when I'm traveling, and I hope to travel a lot more. So for the time being, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. But long term, I see a shuttle bus in my future and somewhere permanent to park it. So that's it for the Q&A today. Thank you so much to the people that sent in their questions. You can keep sending me questions and I'll just collect them up and maybe do a Q&A every now and then when I've got enough questions to answer. I'll leave the video here for today. Thank you so much to all the new subscribers again and to all my regular viewers. Give me a thumbs up. Share the videos, like the videos, comment on the videos, and if you're not subscribed, please do. I think I'm actually up to about 30% now of the people watching are subscribing, which is really encouraging. So please do subscribe if you haven't. It would mean the world to me. It would make a huge difference to how many adventures I can take you on with me. So wherever you are in our incredible, lovely big world, I hope you're having a wonderful day. And I'm going to say bye-bye for now.